Hello everyone, my name's Jeremy, and in today's video I'll show you how to create a business request process using Microsoft Forms and Power Automate and integrating that with an outside business application. Let's get started. In the example I'll be showing, an individual fills out a business document request form. They enter the name of the document they are searching for and a brief description of the request. Microsoft SharePoint is then parsed to see if any files match the name of the file listed in the request. If the file is found, an email will be sent to the requester including a link to the file. If the file isn't found, the requester will be informed that the file isn't available and that a content request task has been created in HighGear. When you go into HighGear, you can see that the task has been automatically created by Power Automate. We're now in Power Automate looking at the first step of our automation. You can see that the trigger step associated with the automation is waiting for the Microsoft form that was shown in the beginning of the video to be submitted by someone. If you're searching for this trigger function in Power Automate, the default name for it is when a new response is submitted. Looking into the second step of the automation, get details of the content request, we're once again identifying the form that is being referenced as well as the response ID that we want to pull information from. The response ID dynamic content was retrieved from the trigger step of this automation. Once this step is completed, information such as the responses to the form questions, form submitter email, and the time of submission is captured as dynamic content by Power Automate. The default name for this action is Get Response Details. In the next step, we're defining which location in SharePoint we should be searching for the file in. You'll specify which SharePoint site, the name of the library, and the name of the folder that is being searched in if applicable. In the filter query field, we've indicated that we're searching for a substring of the text that was entered into the Microsoft form question that asks for the name of the file. The default name of this action is Get Files, Properties Only. In the fourth step, we're setting up the table that presents the files in the email that is sent to the form submitter if the files were successfully found in SharePoint. In the From field, insert the dynamic content titled Value that was pulled from the third step of the automation. In the expression next to the preview header, you can see we're adding a preview image of the file that was retrieved. In the expression next to the link header, we've inserted a clickable link that appears as the name of the file. Writing expressions in Power Automate typically requires different levels of technical ability depending on the complexity of the expression. So if you do this, it would be best to have somebody with programming knowledge to give you your desired results. The default name for this action in Power Automate is Create HTML Table. In step 5, find user information for the requester. The search term field is populated with the dynamic content titled Responder's Email. This was retrieved from the second step of the automation. When this step takes place, Power Automate will attempt to find information on the individual who submitted the form based on their email. This will retrieve information such as the name, company, job title, and location of the user if it's filled out on their Microsoft account. If you're looking for the default name of this action, it is Search for Users v2. In step 6, Initialize Requester Variable, we're defining the requester as an object in Power Automate and populating its values with all of the outputs from the previous step. This is important going into the next two steps of the automation because the requester object will be referenced in order to create other forms of dynamic content that will be used. The default name for this action in Power Automate is Initialize Variable. Steps 7 and 8 of this automation follow similar logic. Both are creating dynamic content by referencing the requester variable that was just created in the previous step. You can see that when we set the full name of the requester, the dynamic content that is created as a result will reference the display name value that was pulled from the fifth step of the automation. When we set the first name of the requester, we're referencing the given name value that was also pulled from step 5. The screenshot that just appeared shows what the dynamic content that was created in these steps appears like when selecting it from the dynamic content menu. Though both say outputs, you can determine which is which by looking at the name of the step above the dynamic content. In Power Automate, the default name of this action used in these steps is Compose. The ninth and final step of this process uses a conditional action that checks for how many file names match the search query after step 3 of the automation took place. This also uses an expression that defines that we're counting the number of files found in this step. The automation will go down the yes path if the number of files is greater than 0, and will go down the no path if 0 files were found. If files were found, Power Automate will send an email to the requester that includes a link to the documents they searched for. You can see that the email includes dynamic content that was pulled from the various steps of the automation. This includes the form submitter email address, the first name output that was created in the previous step, as well as the search term that was used when the form was filled out. The expression that is located near the bottom of the email includes the table that was created in step 4 of the automation that includes the link and preview of the file. In the situation that files aren't found and the automation goes down the no path, we can see that a different email is sent to the form submitter stating that files weren't found and that a HighGear task was created for the file request. After this, Power Automate will create the content request in HighGear based on the form submission. You can see that we're using dynamic content from the form to populate fields in HighGear, and we're using the UTC-now expression to label the request date as the current time. In HighGear, we've configured a workflow to be initiated when the task is created using Power Automate. Once the task is created, HighGear users can work as they normally would to fulfill the request. Now that I've shown you how the example was configured, I'm back in Power Automate looking at the outputs of the request I showed in the beginning of the video. You can see the different types of information that were pulled when the details of the content request were retrieved. Going further down the automation, we can see the results of the condition that determine whether the form submitter should be sent an email with the files that were found, or if they should be sent an email stating that they weren't found and that a task was created in HighGear for it. And lastly, the HighGear action shows different information such as what was entered into its different task fields, as well as the ID of the newly created task. That brings us to the end of this tutorial. If you have any questions or would like to see other videos like this, reach out to support@highgear.com. Thank you.